Welcome to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. I'm your host, Hope Bohannick, and today we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, and that is the humane hoax or humane washing in animal farming with Lia Wilbourn. Before we get into our conversation, I want to first welcome any new folks to the podcast. We had a bump in the numbers last month, so we likely have some new listeners. Welcome. Not sure how it happened. Maybe the algorithm fairies were smiling on us. Maybe one of the algorithm fairies went vegan and spread the word. So, if you are new to the pod, I'll just give a short bit of info here. I haven't done that for a while, so maybe this will be new for quite a few of you. I've been vegan myself for over 35 years and an animal rights activist for that time, for 3 decades. And this podcast focuses primarily on inspirational voices within the movement on a grassroots level. I interview activists and animal sanctuary folks and documentary journalists, people that are doing the good work on the ground. I also like to have authors and educators and academics on, people who can dig deep into a subject, really explore aspects of animal advocacy in depth. But what you won't find here are big names and heads of big orgs. There's a lot of pods out there featuring those folks. I like to uplift the activists that are on the ground, in the trenches. That's really that's such a military term, huh? In the trenches, like warfare. What's a more nonviolent way of saying it? Well, I'll just say the grassroots, right? The people that are doing the good work on the grassroots level. I also lean towards the spiritual, particularly Eastern traditions from India, and we talk about that sometimes here on the podcast. So if you go to our website, hopefortheanimalspodcast.org, on the top menu, there's a button called Episodes, and that has a drop down menu where I've categorized some of the episodes by subject. So you can listen to past episodes that are within your interest. I have one for the environment, for spiritual, for chickens, anti oppression activism. Or you can hit the button All Episodes and see what sparks your interest. I have over 100 episodes now. This is episode 124. But the further you go back in time, the worse the audio editing is. Just a disclaimer, audio editing is a skill that I've been cultivating now for a few years, and I'm getting better. I do this entire podcast myself and I'm self taught, so please be forgiving of some of the earlier episodes. This podcast is just one of the projects of my nonprofit, Compassionate Living. We also organize two Veg Fests, the Sonoma County Veg Fest in Santa Rosa, California, and the Eugene Vegan Fest in Eugene, Oregon, coming up in May. Another is our Ahimsa Living Project. Ahimsa is a Sanskrit word meaning nonviolence, and this project focuses on spiritual veganism through the Dharma traditions. We have a monthly online gathering that we're reviving on November 8th after a short break called the Ahimsa Living Circle. Compassionate Living also has our Humane Hoax project. This might be what I would consider our signature project or our main focus. I've written two books on humane washing and greenwashing. The first was a decade ago called The Ultimate Betrayal, and the more recent book is an anthology that I edited called The Humane Hoax, with 18 contributing authors who wrote various aspects about various aspects of the issue. We have a volunteer team and a website, humanehoax.org, and we do webinars and other events on the subject. And I'd like to just say too, some people don't like to use the term humane hoax because they think that it's my term or that they're whatever using my signature something or other. Please use that term. That's totally fine. I have no claim on that term. I don't I want it to be far and wide. We can call it the humane myth, the humane hoax. I don't care. Please feel free to use that term. That's totally fine. And even though I started talking about this issue 2 decades ago, I feel that it's more important now than ever. The market for humanely labeled products is just growing, and they're lulling consumers into this false sense that things are getting better, that conditions for animals are improving, and that there's some humane ways to commodify someone's body and take their life. And none of that is true. So, we are going to dig into all of this with our guest today, Lia Wilbourn, who was really gracious in letting me put in more than my 2 cents worth in this interview. Of course, it's a subject that I am obviously very passionate about. So, I hope you enjoy our conversation. Okay, today on the podcast, we have Lia Wilbourn. She has been active in a wide range of animal rights activism, including street outreach, demonstrations, writing, social media, speeches, and art as activism. She's currently the Farmed Animals Campaign Coordinator at In Defense of Animals, a position that I may have held at some point in my life. And there she advocates via articles, petitions, videos, etc., and co-hosts a monthly online vegan mentor support group. She also works with allied scholars for animal protection, and she is certified in plant-based nutrition through Cornell University. Welcome to the podcast, Lia.
Thank you, Hope. It's so great to be here and such an honor.
I'm glad you could join me. It's so interesting to me that you hold the position that I did at IDA many, many, many moons ago. So that's really cool that you are carrying on that tradition.
Indeed, yeah. And how funny how I didn't know that until, yeah, I saw you, I think it was about a year ago. We'd met briefly before that, and then I mentioned to you that that's what I'm doing now, and you're like, that's what I did.
Yep, that's what I
Okay.
used to do.
Yeah, carrying the
I love it.
torch.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Well, so I do work for In Defense of Animals. I'm their Farmed Animals Campaign Coordinator. And I also do occasional contract work for Allied Scholars for Animal Protection, as you mentioned. Today, though, and just in general, I'm representing myself independently today.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
my own activist, so anything that I say or talk about isn't necessarily the views of either of those two organizations.
Good to know. All right, wonderful. Well, Lia, we love to start by getting to know you with the question, why and when did you go vegan?
Okay. I'm almost positive it was 2013, but I don't have a specific date or day. But
Yeah, I don't either. I just have the year. So, yeah,
right, right.
I get that.
Yeah. So it was, I would say, three or four different kind of pinnacle moments, just that I still remember to this day in small ways, and then a much larger way, my entire worldview changing kind of in an instant, or at least opening up my mind and my whole sense of myself. So if I look back on it now, I believe the first thing that happened was I was in the library and just, I don't even remember why. And I see this book called The Kind Diet by Alicia Silverstone, actress back in the day. And
Yes, Clueless.
Clueless,
Best
yes, and
movie
other.
ever of the 90s. Yeah.
I know, I know. So I like her, but also, her mother and my mother were friends, were good friends.
Really?
And they were pregnant. Yeah. And then when I was very, very young, and then I think they just went there, they just both moved to different areas. They lost touch over the years. But my mom has only ever had positive things to say about Alicia's mom. And then I'm like, oh, Alicia Silverstone is vegan, huh? And it's not like I've been in touch with Alicia at all, but apparently we played together as kids a couple.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I check out this book from the library, and I still remember lying in bed that evening and opening it up, thinking I'm going to read about just her life and food. And I got to give her props because I think it's just like the second or third page of the book before she even gets into recipes and healthy eating and the whole thing. She goes into some detail describing when she found out what really goes on in farms and slaughterhouses to farmed animals. And these are things that I had never heard of before, some of the things that she was mentioning. And it just had a visceral effect on me. Got a lump in my throat. Um, I was just horrified
Yeah.
just by what I was reading.
Yeah.
And then it stayed with me. And not long after that, I was in a grocery store and I happened to be at the cheese counter. I wasn't buying any cheese, but I was just hovering around it where they had all these fancy cheeses out. And the person behind the cheese counter was talking to a customer. And I can't remember their conversation. All I remember is hearing, yeah, it's too bad that the dairy cows are killed. Just that little piece
Mm.
of information, which actually I didn't read about in Alicia's book in that moment. Wait, what? That was my like, wait a minute, what? And I didn't interrupt them or talk to them. But I remember in that moment also being disgusted and then at the same time looking around and then feeling like I was in the Twilight Zone. Like all these people talking about cheese, how wonderful it is, and oh, it tastes so good. And look at these lovely labels and look at these photos and these marketing images, right, of green hills and happy cows. So, for the first time, noticing the deception in marketing. And I can't believe I've never heard, how is it that I've never heard this before? Right. So
Yeah.
I was disgust that I didn't know it, ashamed that I didn't know it, but also anger that it seemed to me in my world, nobody else knew this. And then the big thing was, I also think that is what prompted me to start doing my own looking into it. I must have been Googling or something and searching on YouTube, and up pops a video. It was a PETA video that I didn't even realize now was PETA, but I see Paul McCartney's face, and he's just, hello, I'd like to tell you behind the scenes of what goes on in the animal agriculture industry. So instead of turning away, and because as a kid, I grew up with the Beatles, had a soft spot in my heart for Paul McCartney and the Beatles. Okay, I wanted to listen to him. And I'd known that he was vegetarian. I'd always known that. And his wife, Linda, in the 70s, was talking a lot about vegetarianism, and she influenced him to go vegetarian. Now, this video didn't even mention the word vegan, but I just watched the whole thing, and that was the moment that utterly devastated me, and yeah, I'd say traumatized me. But in the best possible way. I'd never wish trauma on anyone, but if it's opening your eyes to something that you're taking part in, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. And honestly, just circling back to right now, right here in my life, that is why I've become so involved, because I wish someone had stopped me and just told me the truth and was willing to show me the truth, because it wasn't until I saw not just the slaughter, not just the blood, not just the factual terrible things that are done, but I heard the cries of the animals and I saw the fear in their eyes and in their faces and the terror, the pain. And it was an existential, spiritual moment for me, an epiphany, where I saw them looking right at me and begging me and pleading with me, why are you doing this to me? That's what I felt in that moment.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, well, I love that Alicia Silverstone's book, The Kind Diet, kind of was your catalyst that drew you in because, I don't like celebrity vegan culture for the most part, just because it can be so, they can go back and forth so much. Celebrities go vegan, then they go back to not being vegan, and then they'll be very vocal about not being vegan. And they have such a huge platform. So I don't really like that. However, there are some like the two you mentioned, Alicia Silverstone and Paul McCartney, they are in it for the animals. They are ethical vegans, longtime vegans. So that's really great. So Leah, we have a common concern or a common frustration in the humane hoax or humane washing. And you recently joined us on our volunteer team for the Humane Hoax Project, which is a project of compassionate living, like this podcast. So, what is it about the humane hoax that you feel is problematic? Talk about the humane hoax and why it bothers you.
Okay. So in all my years of just kind of being vegan on my own, and then now, working for a couple different organizations, when I simply talk to people, whether it be vegans or non-vegans, aside from the typical most common objections, which tends to be, oh, well, we've always done it this way, and taste, convenience, that whole thing. But I would say just as much what comes up is, well, yes, of course. I mean, I love animals and they really need to be treated better. And that's why I look and that's why I look for humane products.
Mm,
I look for, and then you get all the words that you start hearing everyone say: free
yeah.
range, cage free, grass fed, organic, small, local, family farmers. So it's just so huge now. And the reason why that has become so much a part of our lexicon now in Western society, especially with all that marketing, I think in a way it's an indication of how far the animal rights movement has come. Actually, because of technology and YouTube and video, and anyone can now share undercover footage, this footage and this truth is getting out there more and more. But people are often referring to the bad, well, it's all bad, right? But saying, this is what factory farming is. And so people are starting to get a sense, okay, it's this factory farming thing that's so terrible. And of course, I'm against that. But animal ag, of course, has gotten wise to the fact that more people are becoming more informed and seeing the terrible things that animals are put through, but most people are associating those terrible things with factory farms. So animal ag now is like, we just need to change how we speak about it. So as long as we convince the public that no, no, we're not a factory farm, now you have some of the largest producers in the world, producers of meat, dairy, and eggs, calling themselves in their marketing family farms. Now, of course, it works so well because we want to believe it. Consumers want to believe it. So we'll feel better. And as I like to tell people too, to make this point, I get it. I fell for it too. I remember before I read The Kind Diet, I was just starting to question a little bit because I had noticed just of myself when I would go in and buy eggs, I would always look for the cage-free, quote, free range, quote, egg cartons. And I remember one day I just thought to myself, this is probably BS. Wait a minute, why am I so quick to believe this label?
Well,
Yeah, and it was soon after that that I came across the Kind Diet and everything else changed for me, but
yeah. Well, that's
yeah,
that's great that you had that feeling. I wonder if many people do. I hope they do. Because it just seems so obvious to me that it's such blatant, cover up and lies. But yet millions of cartons are sold and millions of dollars are made. So somebody is wanting to believe it, right?
and I think that's the thing. We want to believe it. And unless we come across more truth, because here's the thing, when I went vegan, I didn't know any other vegans at all. I don't, I remember I had been working for this like vegetable juice company for a little bit, and I was giving out samples somewhere, and this guy walked up to me, and he was in his cycling gear, and somehow it just came up, and he went, "Oh, I'm vegan." And he was the first person I remember who called himself a vegan, and it was perfect that he, of all people, was the person that I'd met, called himself vegan because he looked like an athlete. and
Mm.
he was very nice and the whole thing. But I went, huh, interesting. So he's vegan. Okay, that opened up my mind a little bit, right? But unless you're kind of seeking out to find the truth, or you're coming across it like I did, on YouTube, or you hear something, you're getting these little seeds planted in your mind, and all you know is everyone else around you, all of society is like, oh yeah, I'm an animal lover and I eat animals, or I eat the milk and eggs of animals. Then it's just not part of it's not on your radar.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
deal. That's where we all come in, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I like that you said, it's kind of because of animal advocates and our success that this is all happening. And
Right.
that's true. We have done a really good job of getting the word out about the horrors of animal agriculture, getting the videos out, getting the truth out. And so the industry has responded with, this hoax, this huge cover up with the labels and the websites with beautiful pictures and images of animals in the fields and all of that, when the reality has not changed. It is, in fact, getting worse for animals. Yeah, for the most part. So you said it a little bit, but I wanted to dig in deeper to the term factory farming
Hmm.
because this is, I think, a really interesting aspect of the humane hoax. So, this term has been really successful. We've used it through the years, through these last 3 or 4 decades, to expose animal agriculture for what it is, what it truly is, turning the animals into machines, commodifying them, and it's really been a very powerful term, and it's done a good job. It's done its job. However, now that we have this humane washing problem, I feel, and I know that you agree with me on this, that we really need to phase out this term factory farming. The reason being that now people see two different kinds of farming or two different aspects or two different ways to farm animals. Either the commodification, the commercial, the regular way, or the way it's been done, which they have labeled factory farming. And that's because of us, because animal advocates have labeled that factory farming. But now they think that there's this other way, this kinder, gentler, whatever way to farm animals on small farms. When you dig in, there is so little difference, even if it is a smaller farm. And most of the large farms, most of the big ag is still using this, these terms. So it's not necessarily that it's a small farm, but even when it is a smaller farm, there are these inherent cruelties that are still being used for all the farming practices, whether it's debeaking, whether it is artificial insemination, all these horrible things that we've been exposing are still there under these labels, under all these labels of cage free, free range, on and on. So we are kind of feeling that as an animal advocate community, we need to stop using this term factory farming because it is reinforcing that separation, right? That there's factory farming and there's other farming. And we're kind of telling people it's okay to support that other farming. So how does this term factory farming kind of play into the hands of animal agriculture?
So much to unpack there.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Well, the first thing I would just like to give a little example. Okay, in my own area, I live in a part of California where there's been this big controversy, and well, it's not controversy, it's a disgusting thing that's been happening in a national park up here. The small local organic dairy ranches in Point Reyes National Seashore, in partnership with the National Park Service, had a huge fence erected that basically trapped the endangered tule elk. It's supposed to be a tule elk reserve in a national park. And over the course of a few years, over 500 tule elk died of starvation because they were trapped on a peninsula, and couldn't get around. And the fence was put up because the ranchers wanted to supposedly, quote, protect their, quote, cattle, right? So I got involved in that. This was around 2019, 2020. Now we've since had a bit of a victory, which is great. The battle continues, but and I was asked to give a speech about this, and that brings up another subject. I was told to not bring up, by some environmental advocates, don't bring up the V word, don't bring up veganism.
Mm.
But we can talk more about that in a moment. But so I went out, I got involved, and the first protest that I joined was out, and we were in front of a quote, small local organic dairy ranch. But I'm noticing all these wonderful people that are showing up to speak up against what was happening to the wild animals, the tule elk. And I just happen to be having a conversation with a few of them, and I keep hearing them say, it's terrible what the meat industry and factory farming is doing. And I said, yes. However, do you realize that these ranches we just drove past, these are your small local organic
Yeah.
quote farms, and these are dairy farms. So it's actually the actual small local organic dairy farms that have caused this horror to happen to these wild animals that everyone loves so much, right? And I just started getting really frustrated realizing that all these good intentioned people were continuing to eat their small local organic animal products, right?
Yeah.
And they kept saying it's factory farms that are the problem. And then you fast forward to now. I have to give you a shout out, Hope, of course, because it was a few years ago. I can't remember when. Maybe I was at a veg fest and I saw a meme, a postcard, and I come to find out later it was yours. And it was this great illustration of showing some animal advocates saying, please sign this petition to end factory farming. And then the person says, oh, yes, I love animals too. I'm against factory farming. And then they run off to buy, oh, now this makes me want to buy my humane certified products even more.
Yeah.
The issue there was that the advocate wasn't educating them on the fact that all animal quote farming, that's another thing that comes up, right? Is language. I don't refer to it anymore as agriculture. I just think that word is too nice. And I sometimes say agribusiness, or I want to use the same word farming because it connotes something good in people's minds. So, all animal farming, not just factory farming, the underlying basis of it all is the exploitation of animals. At any time, anyone, whether it's a human animal or a non-human animal, is being exploited and commodified and treated like property, they will be hurt, they will be abused, and there will inevitably be cruelty. I then just started seeing so many advocates too continuing to use this term, factory farming. And I would notice, like on social media, they're making posts about how bad factory farming is. All these commenters saying, you're so right. Good for you. Thank you for speaking up. Yeah, we really have to support our small local organic farmers.
Yeah. Oh
You know?
God.
I was like,
Ah.
wait a minute. These
Yeah.
advocates who are speaking up so passionately against factory farming, they don't really realize that it's actually just like you said, it's perpetuating this myth of humane, right?
Yeah.
And making people look for those products and then feeling even better if they sign a petition or they donate to an organization that says factory farming is bad. That actually makes us feel better, like we're helping animals, right? I'm going to donate to this organization that says factory farming is bad. Well, they're not actually mentioning anything about killing the animals, so I guess it must be okay.
Mm.
I guess it must be okay that I'm going to continue to eat these products
Yeah.
that have all these words on them that make me feel better. So I wrote an article for In Defense of Animals, and there's a video that goes with it that I helped to create. And the article is called Fixating on Factory Farms Limits True Reform for Animals and the Environment. So I always come at it from the animal's perspective, but there's also an environment factor here too, because advocates who are railing against factory farms often say, and factory farms are so terrible for the environment. Now, the impression that that gives to your average reader or who hears that is that that's true, right? Now, of course, it is true. However, the implication, if again, they're only talking about factory farming and not all of it, is that grass-fed must be better. And then you hear and you see certain documentaries coming out, all about let's get back in touch with the land. And oh, this wonderful new term called regenerative.
Regenerative.
Agriculture. Okay. So the thing that I pointed out in this article and that I really try to make clear to folks is, okay, if grass-fed is so much better, there's been a few studies that have come out now, peer-reviewed scientific studies that have proven that if everyone were to switch from the bad factory farm products, right, which they're all factories, that's another point you've made so beautifully in the past. It's a factory. If someone is being exploited as a commodity, that is inherently makes it a factory,
Yep.
whether it's a small farm or a big farm, right?
Yep. Yep.
But if everyone were to switch, which is what Animal Ag wants us all to think, we just have to buy a product that says grass-fed or regenerative. If that really happened, if we got rid of all the factory farms, but instead replaced them with only grass-fed and quote regenerative animal farming, it would take up to 2.5 times more land and resources and water and emit far more methane. Methane is 80 times more destructive than carbon dioxide. This is a huge point to make with environmentalists too.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Leah, I just want to cry. Thank you so much for saying all that so beautifully. It's, just this stuff that I've been saying for years, and it's so beautiful to see other activists now get it and be talking about it. So thank you for that. And there was so much there that I'd love to respond to, but I'll tell a story of my own. Recently I was standing at an outside like poster a board where you post up flyers, and I was standing there with a vegan, with a fellow vegan, and there was a flyer for grass-fed beef, like to buy it. It was just like a very small local whatever. And and I made a comment about it, and my vegan friend said, "Yeah, but at least it's better."
Here you
And
go.
and I was like, no, no, it's really not. And so I ended up taking the flyer down. Of course, the radical hope in me took the flyer down, and I realized that even within our vegan community, we still think that that it's a little better. We have to realize that no, anytime there is commodification, there is exploitation, and there's killing. Not just one cow killed to me is one too many. Just that in and of itself. But then also, like you said, there are environmental factors that are worse. Grass-fed beef causes more greenhouse gas emissions. There's so many factors there that need to be unpacked. And yeah, so I really appreciate all that. And I'd also just want to say, because I think people might be thinking, well, if we can't say factory farming, then what can we say? Right?
Mhm.
What can we say? You just say animal farming or animal agriculture or animal agribusiness,
Yes,
any
I
of
said
those.
animal farming because I like to use that term farming because it flips that word on its head,
Hmm.
because most people are like, farms, small farms are nice. And if you just say all animal farming, within that same conversation though, or when you're saying all animal farming, I've done a couple different evergreen campaign pages that are on the In Defense of Animals website that are right there if you look in the farmed animals section. But there's a humane washing exposed page, and then another page on speciesism we could get into. But I think it's so important to spell out the standard practices in all animal farming, right? And go down the list. I mean,
Yeah.
it's in the top five, right? But I don't say artificial insemination. I say forcible impregnation, mutilations without painkillers. People will say without painkillers as if, well, if there were painkillers, it would be okay. Well, no. But why aren't there painkillers? Again, because farmed animals have no legal protections. And so if farmers don't have to give them painkillers, that's more cost, right? Why would they if they don't have to? Um, so what are the mutilations? Right? And then you have to really tell people because it's only once I found out these specifics, these disgusting horrors that we would never inflict on a dog or a cat or any animal that we've gotten to know. You put the person, the reader, the viewer, you have them see it from the individual's perspective.
And I think your point here is that this applies to every product on the market. Any product that you're going to buy. Doesn't matter the label, doesn't matter the farm, where it came from. This applies across the board. So there is no separation between factory farming and humane and small and cage free and all of that. So, Leah, I really liked you using forced impregnation instead of artificial insemination. Language is so important, and I'm always talking about language and wanting to improve our language, and I really like that, and I'm going to start doing that. I want to change my language around that because it's true. That's what it is: forced impregnation, and a sexual violation. And I often do say that artificial insemination is a sexual violation, but I think that you're right. Artificial insemination, that's just too clinical and too light a term for what it truly is. Then getting back to the term factory farming and kind of wanting to phase that out of our use as advocates and using the word all,
Exactly.
saying,
That's what I say. Yes.
yeah, saying
Oh.
all animal farming, all animal agribusiness
Mhm.
is cruel. I think the problem with factory farming is that it's become such a catchphrase in our lexicon as activists that we're just so used to saying factory farming, and it gets used and we don't even think about it, right? We don't even think about the implications of it. So using different terms, breaking it up, I think is important.
Mhm. Yes, when we use the term factory farming, I really think from what I've noticed, animal ag doesn't really have a problem with that. In fact, it's really playing into the hands of animal ag.
That's
But
right.
then they just say, oh, yeah, we're not factory farming. Yeah, we're against factory farming too. It's all bad. It's
Mm,
all cruelty. It's all exploitation and killing.
yeah.
The killing is often completely bypassed and not brought up. I mean, there's some animal protection organizations now. You go on their website and it just says the problem, and it says factory farming is the problem. And then you're like, what's the solution? And some of them are actually saying, buy humane certified animal products. I mean, taking part in, kind of perpetuating this myth. I just say all of it.
I'm so glad we're having this conversation. No, it's great. It's so good to think deeply about these things, to unpack these things, because language is so important. How we express in our articles, in our videos, whatever, in our webinars, how we express what's going on is how people are going to make change or not, to decide to make change or not, to feel it emotionally. Right. So it's so important. And I appreciate you thinking so deeply about this and giving me things to think about now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the thing about this is a common phrase too, food for thought. It's just food for thought. And meatless Mondays, and well, just start a little bit at a time. That message is completely discounting the experience of the individual. And there's no urgency. There's no ethical imperative to change.
Right. Yeah.
When you're only talking about veganism as a diet and a way of eating and a quote lifestyle that you can just go off and on and just try on occasion, and maybe it'll be your lifestyle for a little bit, and then maybe you'll go back and you just say, if that was a dog you were talking about right now, would it sound fine to you for someone to say, I'm only going to eat dogs, 1 day a week instead of
Yeah.
7 days,
Good
or
point. Yep.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
well, it's so, I know, but that dog lived a nice short life. That dog lived a nice life before we killed him because we like how he tastes, and it's just hard to break the habit. Um,
uh,
I think,
yeah.
I mean, this has taken me years to feel comfortable talking about this and to advocate in this. And yes, yes, it is a quote abolitionist perspective, which to me just means that
Freedom
advocating
for all. Freedom
freedom
for
for
all.
all,
Yeah.
liberation for all. I
Yeah.
mean, this is oppression. This is the largest, really, and longest running and most widespread form of oppression in all of history of the world. And everybody's ignoring them. So, isn't it up to anyone out there who really thinks of themselves as an animal lover? Most people do, to just kind of connect the dots and say, why am I beating around the bush here? Why am I, and not just with my in my own life and being nice to myself and just, or excusing myself. And I'm just saying, going to have a little bit. And also in how I talk to people. Like this was what I felt in the beginning when I first went vegan. I was apologetic, for a while because it's so awkward. It is up to all of us, though, to challenge ourselves and allow for if the person that we're talking to, or if we're sharing something on social media, just accept ahead of time. It's an uncomfortable subject. And yes, it's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. Okay. We just have to accept that. Or, like, where do we stand on things?
Yeah, I love that you said not being apologetic, or that you used to be kind of apologetic about it. Karen Davis, the amazing activist of United Poultry Concerns, who I worked with for many years, she used to always say that. She'd say, don't be apologetic. Be strong, be forthright in how you feel and what you say. And she said, you can be kind, of course. Let's be kind and be compassionate in our delivery. But at the same time, we should feel very secure in what we're saying, because this is the truth, and this is a truth that needs to be out there and people need to hear. So we shouldn't be apologetic in our delivery. Yeah, I loved that. So, another thing I really wanted us to talk about is the cage free conundrum. That's kind of what I'm starting to call it, the cage free conundrum, the cage free phenomenon. Now, cage free eggs are 40% or more, actually. I think it's more than that now, of eggs sold in the US. And some in the animal advocacy movement have recently been calling this industry transition to cage free a win for the animals, like a win for our movement of animal advocacy, which is it's just so frustrating to me because, of course, this is not really a victory at all. We know that the conditions are no better. There are even studies where there are higher mortality rates in cage-free eggs. More chickens die before they go to slaughter, and they're all still going to go to slaughter at a very young age in cage-free. So is this a victory, really? Let's talk about this. How do you feel about this cage-free conundrum?
To me, it just comes across to me as yet another form of humane washing because it's framed as it's better for the animals and it makes people feel better. And again, like I say, I looked for the cage-free labels. In fact, if I hadn't seen a cage-free label, I might not have even bought the eggs. So there you go. If it says cage-free on it, I'm going to be more likely to continue buying eggs.
Right.
And it does conjure in a person's mind and your average consumer. Then you think that they're out, right, roaming around in the grass in sunlight because, oh, they're not in a cage. And what I always say is it's one giant cage. They're all stuffed into, whether it's a smaller facility or a larger facility. But a lot of them are kind of piled right next to each other, on top of each other. Some of them are crippled, they have osteoporosis. A lot of them are struggling and in pain, and some of them collapse onto their backs. They can't even eat. And all this is under this beautiful umbrella term of cage free. And then that's not to mention, it does nothing to change the spread of zoonotic diseases. And look at the bird flu crisis right now, which is very scary and out of control. It's now in over 1,000 dairy herds. But last year, the former director of the Centers for Disease Control said that a pandemic from this bird flu H5N1 virus is inevitable, that we are on our way to
Wow.
another pandemic that will be, I think he said, at least 10 times worse because it would be up to a 50% mortality rate among humans who get it, unlike even COVID. Um,
Well, it's going to be worse because nobody's going to care
Work.
because everyone there was so much misinformation around the masking and the vaccines that nobody's going to do that this time around. It's
Absolutely.
very scary if we have another pandemic. I mean, we could be in for a really, really scary time.
Yeah, and I did this, took part in this sort of speak out last year. We went up to the Farm Bureau, the California Farm Bureau in Sacramento, and it was an unusual public meeting between the cattle, quote, health task force and then the California head veterinarian, the lead veterinarian in California, and a lot of animal ag executives and things were in this meeting. And a few of us advocates went in and we sat and we waited for when the subject of bird flu would come up. And each of us, there were four of us who had our own little planned sort of point we wanted to make, and mine was going to be on the ventilation shutdown. So that
Mm.
is, anyone who doesn't know, that is the standard way now that they're, quote, depopulating, another horrible term, mass killing, in other words, the birds that are infected with bird flu. And some of them, if even one or two of them have bird flu, all of them have to be killed. They have to get rid of them. And the way that they're doing this is they shut off the ventilation system in the facility and they turn up the heat. So the animals, over a period of hours, die from heat stroke, a horrific death, and then they suffocate. Whatever comes first doesn't really matter.
And keeping in mind that cage free and free range, this is no solution to avian flu. It travels just as quickly in a cage free operation. And if they do have access to the outside, which is incredibly rare in free range or pasture raised, that increases the likelihood of avian flu because of wild bird flyover and dropping feathers and droppings into their area. So the cage-free phenomenon, this growing cage-free movement is really no better with avian flu. It's not going to be any kind of a solution. And also something I like to point out is that big ag is really getting on board with the cage free thing now. And big ag is putting a lot of money into building new facilities, transitioning their battery cage facilities into cage free facilities. So, it's the big buildings with thousands of birds in these buildings. It's not just a little farm down the street with a few hens in the backyard. No, these are huge, huge facilities with thousands and thousands of birds. And now, I mean, if we've got 40% or more of eggs that are cage free, that's thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of birds that are affected that are having no better life
Yeah.
than the conventional. Yeah.
Yeah, and animal ag is eating this up because they're like, oh, look, the public loves that we're saying they
Yeah.
love cage free. Okay, no problem. Let's just, no, good. Now we don't have to build tiny cages. Now we can stuff them all into one big cage. And then you have some animal advocates promoting it. And then
Yeah.
that makes
They're going to
their,
make tons of money. And I don't think that most vegans realize how much energy, time, resources is now going to cage free. So I am privileged to be on kind of an insider email list. It's like an invite only email list for, leaders in the animal rights movement.
Mhm.
And when I'm getting these emails, it's not even every other email. It's, I would say, every, like for 5 emails in a row, constantly, it's all about cage free. It's this cage free victory and that cage free victory. And we're now going after this big company for cage free. And now more and more, it's, oh, so this organization isn't fulfilling their obligation to cage free. So we're having to do a whole nother campaign and put all kinds of more energy and time and resources into trying to get this organization that already said they were going cage free to go cage free. And it's just, oh my God. It blows my mind how much of our time, money, jobs, everything is going to this. And it's not even moving us in the direction of vegan.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
Exactly. It's not educating the public, which is our job
no.
as advocates, is to educate the public about what's really happening
Yeah.
in all of this entire system.
And that's something I say, I like to say about, people are like, well, we have to have incremental change and we have to do things slowly, right? And have steps towards the goal of vegan. Yes. But this is, I think, a good measurement of whether it's an effective step or not, is that all of those steps need to be moving us in the direction of vegan, at
Right.
least moving us in the right direction. And cage free does not. All it does is divert us to a whole nother way of exploiting animals. It just diverts to a completely different market where you're still exploiting animals in the same numbers. So, how is that moving us in the right direction?
It makes people feel better about
Yeah,
continuing to eat animal products.
yeah,
Just, yeah, it's very frustrating, I know. And so, yeah, I'm one of those vegans that just really advocates for education and speaking the plain truth. And it's past time now that a lot of us vegans need to kind of get over all of this, not wanting to be seen as a quote preachy or quote extreme. As I like to say, what's extreme is what animal farming is doing to the animals and to our planet.
yeah, yeah,
It's not extreme to simply speak up against it because calling someone extreme for simply telling the truth behind all of it, of course, that's what people did to anyone have done in history, right? To any movement in the beginning that first started speaking up against an atrocity and an oppression is, oh my God, who do you think you are? You're being too extreme. How dare you even suggest? And this is never going to happen. And aha, and they start with those three stages, right? Denial, or at first they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then eventually you win.
yeah, yeah. Well, Leah, there was another subject that we wanted to get into, and our time is ticking.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I love talking to you about all this, but there was another something we wanted to talk about, and I want to get into it. So it's slightly off topic of humane washing, but recently we were on a webinar, and during the Q&A, someone was questioning if we should even be using the term vegan in our advocacy, saying that it, has too much negative connotation, too much baggage, that we should be using some other term. So I want to talk about this. And I have some thoughts too, but let's start with you. How do you feel about this?
Yes, and I was in that and I observed that and I hear that so often.
Do you really? A lot?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
Among other animal protection organizations and even other vegans and animal rights activists. I mean, there's certainly animal rights activists who don't want to use that word.
Yeah, I guess this is coming out more and more.
When I applied for this job with In Defense of Animals, the main reason I did is in my job description was advocating for veganism. So I was really pleased to see that because I'm aware that there are plenty of animal protection organizations that don't do that and
Yeah.
don't use the word. Okay, so for me, I am continuing to use the word, and I also have an article on the that's on the it's a evergreen page on In Defense of Animals called Vegan Wake Up Call, and also another one, Vegan is not a diet, but it's to realize that if we're going to call ourselves vegan, and I do, I really try to clarify what it means, you know? And for me, now, of course, there's quote vegan infighting around that too. Like what is the definition of vegan and veganism? And I do tend to go by the definition, which is simply that it's a rejection of animal exploitation, that it's against the exploitation of animals. Because if you're just talking about treatment or as far as practicable and possible, that can become a mouthful. Because even that has implications of like, yeah, it's a little not practical right now for me. It's a little inconvenient for me. So I like that there's that little note in the old definition that says, as far as is practical and possible, well, yeah, that means that I can kind of not be vegan. I just leave that part of the definition out, which was the Vegan Society used that in the beginning, and then they
Yeah,
updated.
in like the 40s or something. I mean, yeah, it
Yeah,
wasn't practical then.
right,
It's a
right. But
lot more practical now.
yeah, I think at first they said animal products, but then they expanded upon it and realized why that was a problem, that definition. And then they concluded with, one of them, Leslie Cross, concluded with, no, no, we need to get to the underlying issue, which is the using of animals, right? Just using them is the problem. And God bless PETA, because they've been saying that from the beginning. They've just been saying animals are not ours to use. It's quite simple.
Mm,
I think it's quite simple. But I also like to inject that it's also an anti-oppression movement and issue for me. And that's what it comes down to. So I do use the word vegan, but I'm really clear that it's not about being a diet and it's not a lifestyle based around what I'm eating. It's a way of viewing our world and not just food. That's what's so important.
yeah. So for me, with the term vegan and whether or not we should use it, I think that this comes from people that actually are more new to the movement, possibly. I don't know that that's true, but I feel like maybe it's people that have only kind of seen the last, 10, 20 years or so. I've been vegan now 35 years, and the perception of vegan has changed dramatically. I mean, it used to be so much worse, right? I mean, back 35 years ago, first people didn't even know what the word meant. So we've done that. We've done that job. We now know. I mean, like you just said, of
Or
course,
not.
right, or not, right? Well, like you just said, we don't want it to be seen as only a diet. But at least people do know that it means avoiding meat, dairy, and eggs or not eating meat, dairy, and eggs. Like that basic definition, is known. So there's that. The perception has actually changed dramatically, improved
Oh,
dramatically over the last 35 years. So I've been vegan 35 years. And back then, 30 years ago, whenever it came up that I was vegan or, someone learned that I was vegan, the reaction was always negative, I mean, I could be the butt of the joke, or people could be very mean, or I mean, it was very, very negative every time. That has totally changed. Now, when I bring up that I'm vegan or it comes up that I'm vegan, people are much more positive. They'll say things like, "Oh, well, we drink oat milk," or something like that, like they're basically saying, yeah, we should do more of that, or that's great that you do that. It's more of a positive. And of course there's still negative. People still have negative reactions. That happens, but more and more it has gotten better. Now, why I say this and why I think this is important is because it takes a lot of time to build a movement. It
yes.
takes a lot of time to build something, right? To make people understand something. And if we abandoned this term now and tried to shift to something else, we would have to start at ground zero to rebuild something else, right? For there to be a cultural understanding of it. I think that we should just keep going on with vegan and we need to embrace it. It's up to us to embrace vegan pride, vegan joy, expressing that we love being vegan, that it's the greatest experience of our lives to be vegan.
Yeah,
Uh,
I often say it's changed my life for the better in so many ways. It helps me feel more like myself. And
yeah.
because it really does. It really just went, because it kind of, in a way, I don't want to use the word forced, but really made me look at these larger issues within myself of self-expression and what am I really trying to be and accomplish in this world? Is it really most important that I'm just accepted and liked by everybody? No, of course not. That's not what's most important to me. It's not just aligning my actions with my values, but not thinking that there's anything wrong with that and wanting to, of course I want to open people's minds and hearts about it. But even if I'm not able to do that with even a lot of people in the way that I talk about it, that's okay. It has to be okay. And then that helps me to kind of accept myself more in what I'm choosing to do and be in this life. Because I know that if I'm being true to myself, I think all of us have to ask ourselves that question. Being vegan is being true to your own values, but also ask yourself why you don't want to talk about it. Or I had to really reckon with my own self when it came to that, and that more had to do with my own sense of, low self-esteem, or that we all struggle with constantly.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry, you're just so
No, that's
stimulating.
okay. No, it's no, those are really important points that, it's true, like you said earlier, it can be uncomfortable to talk about it with people that are not vegan. And so we have to find that strength in ourselves, that acceptance in ourselves to feel comfortable with it so that we can embrace it and talk about it. So yeah, it's really, really good points. But just a couple other things on this that there's other terms and words, like there's a history of other words in other movements in marginalized communities that have taken a negative word and embraced it and turned it around and turned it into a source of pride. So that's kind of what we're doing with vegan. It's had this kind of baggage around it, but that is changing. And guess what? Products use the term and stores use the term, and they are selling lots of products. So the perception is changing. And another important point is we do have other terms that we have kind of played with, like plant-based, right? Trying to be interchangeable. Plant-based. There's also speciesism that is not as well known. And like if we this is again, if we tried to shift to using a term like speciesism for our movement,
Exactly.
then we'd have to start at ground zero trying to explain to people what the heck it is. I mean, I still think it's an important term to use, and I think that we should be talking about it. But I do think we've got to stick with vegan because that is the only thing that now defines not eating meat, dairy, and eggs. There are products out there that are labeled plant-based but have animal products in them. So it's kind of a more gray area, wishy-washy. It's not as cut and dry that it means no animal products. That's only vegan.
Right. And
So,
the word based right there, like it's based on plants. Okay, even that's open to interpretation.
right.
I
Yeah.
never use the word plant-based. I only use it when I'm talking about my eating, like the food. I'm making all this great because I am vegan, so I eat plant-based, right? That's the way I eat. But it's such a huge difference between those two terms. There isn't another word that that explains it's against the exploitation of animals. Now, I do use the word speciesism, but not with your average everyday person that I talk to necessarily, because most you'd have to explain it. In general, whether to use the word vegan or not, yes, and make sure that you clarify what it means. And for me, I like to always say it's a principle against the exploitation of animals. And what I've noticed is that, most people get that. They understand. And when you say just using animals, because usually if you're going to use them, anytime if you're going to use them, they're going to be hurt. Their needs are not prioritized. And I just say that usually to someone one on one or in advocacy, and they go, "Oh, I thought vegan was just about what I was eating." I'm like, "Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm kind of letting you know this, to try to clarify." And again,
Yeah.
if it's only referring to flesh, dairy, and eggs, again, it doesn't dawn on people all the other ways that animals are exploited and killed doesn't even dawn on people unless, you say that it's against all animal use, because that extends to what they're wearing, and most people don't know, just like I didn't until later. I'd been vegan for a while. I didn't know, didn't dawn on me that animals used for their will are also killed. Their wool, not their will, their wool are also killed, and all these other, and just not to mention animal testing, of course, and the horrors that happen in that entire industry. That's usually not even brought up either when we're talking about the word vegan.
Yeah, no, I think that that is a really good point, that we should embrace it, use the term vegan, but be sure and clarify that it means no exploitation of any animal, any sentient being. It's an
Exactly.
ethical stance, ethical veganism. Yeah, good.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Leah, we do need to wrap up, unfortunately.
Flown by, and you and I could go on and on, I'm sure.
Yes, I know. And we will. I want to talk to you
Oh, I know.
more. Yeah. But so I'm going to ask you our last question. What gives you hope for the future?
Oh, my goodness. What really gives me hope is really my own experience is I didn't have much hope in the beginning because I felt so alone. And all I knew is I couldn't live with myself any longer if I was going to continue doing what I was doing. But there was so much sadness and despair, and there still is. I have my moments of utter despair, and I still cry over what's happening. But what gives me hope and belief, really, in knowing that someday, of course, just like racism still exists, just like human slavery even still exists, the oppression of women still exists, and of, LGBTQ folks around the world. However, I do believe that there will come a day when it will be seen in the same way that the enslavement of humans is seen now, like a horror, an atrocity, and we will look back in shame at what we've done to animals. So right now, what gives me hope and fills me with love and gratitude is all the incredible, brave, courageous vegans who decided to become activists and who decided to, now, when I say activists, they just decided to start speaking up, whether that's in their own lives, regardless of whether they do it for a living or not, which to me, what a privilege it is to be able to actually, say that this is what I do as
Yeah.
my career.
Yeah.
And many don't get that opportunity. And I'm just so grateful. And I like to say that it was all those years of being uncomfortable and having to practice how to talk about it and how to reconcile within myself that I just didn't feel too good about myself when I was constantly staying quiet in order to appease other people, to make everyone else feel okay. That didn't feel okay to me. So, what inspired me all those years ago and still does is people like you, Hope, and so many of the incredible activists and the handful or so of bold, tell it like it is, animal rights organizations who don't shy away from just speaking truthfully, but do it with maturity and compassion. I would just say to everyone, just keep following people who inspire you and the people who are speaking the truth. Just allow yourself to be inspired and allow yourself to really delve into some of this. If it's something that follows you around and you can't stop thinking about, and then encouraging others to think about it and to simply open their hearts. And I also think of, like you mentioned, I mean, 20 years ago, or when I went vegan, there weren't nearly as many, products in the store that I could eat and buy that were vegan, and now there are. And now when I bring it up, just like you said, I've absolutely noticed a sea change in when I even say the word vegan in social situations. People are becoming a little more embracing, and what I've noticed, it sparks their curiosity. And that's all that I need. If it sparks
Mm.
their curiosity, and we can have even a moment where even if it's not a conversation, I'll just plant a seed. I'll give them a piece of information that I wish someone had done for me. So we're just passing it on. I know that we're on the right path. And even if I don't see the end or I don't see a massive change collectively, even in my lifetime, I think we're going to, but even if I don't, I will at least know that I was on the right path and I was part of this incredible movement of change and peace. That's what it comes down to.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Lia, so much for all your work that you're doing on this. Thank you for joining our Humane Hoax Project volunteer team. I'm glad to have you on
I'm
the
so honored
team.
to be part of it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And we'll be doing more work on the humane washing issue. But I really appreciate you. Love talking to you. And I'm so glad you were on the podcast. Thanks.
Thank you, Hope. It's been my pleasure and honor.
Thank you for listening to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are going to be reviving our Ahimsa Living Circle. It will be returning on Saturday, November 8th. And this gathering is for anyone. It's free, it's on Zoom. It's for anyone who is interested in spirituality, leaning towards the Dharma traditions, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and how those ancient wisdoms and ancient traditions intersect with veganism in a modern world. So I hope you will join us for our Ahimsa Living Circle. It's every second Saturday of the month, starting again in November, November 8th, 2025, and ongoing after that. And you can go to Compassionate Living's website to register, compassionate-living.org, and we'll have a link in the show notes of this podcast. And the Ahimsa Living Circle information will be on our homepage and our event page, and you can click there to register for free. And I hope to see you there. Okay, I hope that you are able to bring some of the things that you learned today out into the world, spread the compassion around, and live vegan.